Tonight, tensions escalate in Los Angeles as the Marines deploy to L.A.
And protests break out from New York to Chicago.
What you're witnessing in California is a full-blown assault on peace, on public order.
President Trump defends his decision, calling demonstrators paid troublemakers without any evidence. All of this while a war of words between Trump and Governor Gavin Newsom heats up.
The absurdity of this cannot be understated.
I think his primary crime is running for governor because he's done such a bad job.
The uproar over Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s decision to remove every member of the CDC's Vaccine Advisory Board, a move he promised he would not take during his confirmation hearing, who this decision could put at risk. Chilling new images as we learn details about the deadly school shooting overseas. Violence in Gaza reaches new heights during attempts to get aid over the border. Sports gambling, more than 36 states allow it, and it's causing some to lose their life savings. Tonight in our Prime Focus, our in-depth look at the rise in gambling on live sports and advice former gambling addicts have for those who are now getting caught up.
How big of a problem is this?
By sheer number of people impacted, I think that we're on a trajectory to see the worst epidemic of addiction that the world has ever seen.
And he fronts the award-winning reboot of Queer Eye. Stylist Jonathan Van Ness is here to discuss his latest project, a novel about the tribulations of a gender non-conforming 18-year-old.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is Prime with Linsey Davis.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Linsey Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We begin with the growing protest over President Trump's immigration policies and the use of military force in Los Angeles. As night falls in L.A., Mayor Bass has issued a curfew for parts of downtown L.A. Protesters have moved onto the 101 freeway, blocking traffic. We've seen police there making arrests this evening amid the tension. Here's L.A. Mayor Karen Bass talking about that curfew.
I wanted to let the city know that I have declared a local emergency and issued a curfew for downtown Los Angeles to stop the vandalism, to stop the looting. So my message to you is, if you do not live or work in downtown LA, avoid the area. Law enforcement will arrest individuals who break the curfew, and you will be prosecuted.
Governor Gavin Newsom held a press conference earlier tonight addressing the ongoing protests in L.A. Here's what he had to say.
If some of us could be snatched off the streets without a warrant, based only on suspicion or skin color, then none of us are safe. Authoritarian regimes begin by targeting people who are least able to defend themselves, but they do not stop there.
And now the protests are spreading to other cities. In Chicago, thousands of anti-ICE protesters clogged parts of Lakeshore Drive. Police there are guiding the protesters to keep moving and directing traffic around the crowds. Here in New York City, demonstrators are gathering outside federal immigration offices. We start in Los Angeles with ABC's chief national correspondent Matt Gutman inside the LAPD command center tonight.
In a push to get the upper hand on the protest disrupting downtown Los Angeles, an aggressive show of force by the LAPD overnight, arresting over 100 people. Dozens of less lethal rounds used by law enforcement to disrupt groups, setting fireworks off at officers. Officers pouring in from every direction, overwhelming protesters. Tonight, President Trump defending his actions, saying those 700 Marines and more than 4,000 National Guard troops sent to L.A. against the wishes of officials on the ground here are there to stay. Addressing troops at Fort Bragg.
They're stopping an invasion just like you'd stop an invasion.
Trump appearing to accuse the California governor and LA mayor of paying demonstrators with no proof.
And they paid troublemakers, agitators, and insurrectionists. They're engaged in this willful attempt to nullify federal law and aid the occupation of the city by criminal invaders. That's what it is.
Trump even suggesting without evidence that without the help of the National Guard, the city would be in flames. But we witnessed many of the protesters self-policing, keeping others in check. The National Guard's role has been minimal. California Governor Gavin Newsom posting this picture online, showing troops resting on the floor, suggesting the Trump administration sent those men and women without first securing a place for them to sleep or arranging supplies like food and water. calling it a haphazard stunt. The military disagreeing, responding, the soldiers have ready access to food and water as needed. There are now more U.S. troops deployed to Los Angeles than Iraq and Syria. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth on Capitol Hill with DoD leaders saying the mission will go on for the next 60 days, costing $134 million.
We have deployed National Guard and the Marines to protect them in the execution of their duties, because we ought to be able to enforce immigration law in this country.
Why are you sending war fighters to cities to interact with civilians?
Every American citizen deserves to live in a community that's safe, and ICE agents need to be able to do their job. They're being attacked for doing their job, which is deporting illegal criminals.
And in the latest round of his feud with President Trump, late today, Governor Gavin Newsom pushing back, asking the court to block the unprecedented use of military personnel to assist with immigration raids. And a short time ago, LAPD Chief Jim McDonnell addressing accusations his officers did too little, too late to assist federal officers.
My understanding, based on what we've looked at, is it was within 38 minutes. Normal
total from the time that you started to the time you actually got
from the time that we became aware of the need to the time we got there was 38 minutes.
Our thanks to Matt Gutman, and let's go now to Melissa Dunn, who's live in Los Angeles right now. Melissa, what are you seeing at this moment?
So, Lindsay, we've now moved, essentially, protesters started marching away from that federal building. And right now there is this interfaith rally that's going on. They're holding essentially a vigil. You can see the crowds there of at least 100 people and so much more now starting to trickle in. So many people have basically been marching across this downtown LA area. It's probably about a square mile. And in fact, that same square mile is where just moments ago, Mayor Karen Bass has issued a curfew starting tonight at 8 p.m. local up until 6 a.m. tomorrow local time. There will be in that square mile here in downtown Los Angeles, where we've seen predominantly so many of these protests now for a fifth night in a row, there is a curfew in place. So, Lindsay, this is what we're monitoring right now as we're just listening to on the stage. You can see several interfaith leaders that are speaking to the crowd, sharing some prayers and really pushing their message for immigration officials to stop the raids here in Los Angeles.
Of course, hoping that those protests stay peaceful. Melissa Dunn, our thanks to you. Now to Chicago, where a group of anti-ICE protesters are blocking streets downtown. Reporter Trey Ward from our partner station WLS is there for us. Hi, Trey.
Lindsay, we've been following this growing protest for nearly 5 hours through the downtown Chicago streets. And at this time, we're seeing protesters now ending their rally here at Daley Plaza, but still standing in solidarity with the anti-ICE protesters in Los Angeles, while also speaking out against ICE activity and ICE arrests last week in Chicago's South Loop neighborhood, where people were arrested coming out of an immigration facility. Now, at this time, this has been going on since 3 this afternoon and has remained mostly peaceful, except for about 3:15 this afternoon when we saw a driver go through a large crowd of people. That crowd parting as that driver was speeding through. Chicago police giving a thumbs up that no one was hurt, and the march continued at this hour. Again, this has been going on since 3 this afternoon and now ending here at Daley Plaza in Chicago's downtown neighborhood. And we are still tracking the protest as they say they are speaking out against what they say are unjust immigration enforcement. Back to you.
Similar messages across the country. Trey Ward, our thanks to you. We want to continue the conversation about what's happening in Los Angeles right now. For that, we're joined by California Senator Alex Padilla. Senator, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. The images over the weekend were alarming of demonstrators storming the freeway, Waymo taxis going up in flames. Several officers were injured. Monday, National Guard troops arrived and calmed things down considerably. So is President Trump on fair ground, would you say, when he says that he's restoring order to the city?
So not quite, Lindsay. Thank you for having me. I think there's a couple of important things to clarify. As not just local leaders, the governor, the mayor, but even the sheriff and the chief of police will tell you, the people out protesting peacefully during the day is very different than the crowd that shows up once the sun goes down and is responsible for a lot of the vandalism and the violence and the images that you're describing. So I don't want to say that the immigration right advocates and the organizers and demonstrators there are the ones responsible for the destructive activity. The violence and the violence needs to stop. Everybody's united in denouncing that because it's taken away from the message that they have. That's number one. Number two, let's think of why we're here to begin with. This is a crisis of Donald Trump's making. You know, the overly and increasingly aggressive actions through this immigration enforcement, the theatrics and the cruelty with which ICE and other federal agents, but look, Los Angeles is no stranger to demonstrations, to protests, to rallies and marches between the police department, the sheriff department, and other agencies in the area. They can handle this. The president of the National Guard has only escalated tensions. The threat of sending Marines is only further escalating tensions.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was on Capitol Hill today and said the military deployments to Los Angeles will cost at least $135 million. Do you think you're going to be challenging that expenditure?
Well, we're challenging the expenditure, particularly if the costs are borne by the state, not the federal government. This is a crisis of Donald Trump's making.
Hegseth also asserted that he and the president have the power to send National Guard and active duty troops anywhere in the country in support of ICE agents. Your reaction to that?
Yeah, well, do they have some authorities? Of course, but only with proper justification, which they have failed to provide thus far. When Marines leadership is finding out about these mobilizations through the press, and they can't answer to us the question of what's their mission? What training have they had to execute whatever that mission is? It's not just a sign of the disorganization and the chaos of the Trump administration, but it's a threat to public safety because it makes the job of local police and local sheriffs that much more difficult.
What details can you share with us about the ICE raids that are taking place in Southern California right now? Do you have a sense of the number of the raids or the people detained, or are these strictly criminals or in some cases just, workaday people?
Look, I'll answer the second part first. These are not just criminals. Again, if it was just a targeting of dangerous criminals and violent criminals, there would be no debate, there would be no disagreement, there would be no discussion. But what's happening in practice, and what's been happening in practice since January 20th, the beginning of the second Trump administration, is far beyond that. You have otherwise innocent women, children, and fathers wrapped up in these raids. Donald Trump doesn't care. There's this artificial quota in his head that he's trying to meet, and it doesn't matter whether you're a dangerous criminal or not.
How do you respond to the fact, though, that a majority of Americans support the president's efforts to remove immigrants living here without legal documentation? This is something that really the Trump administration would say, look, this is something that Trump ran on, another example of promises made and promises kept.
Yeah, look, obviously I've seen a lot of the polls, and it all depends on how you ask the question. If you start getting into specifics, like do Dreamers deserve to be deported or do they deserve protections? Dreamers have wide bipartisan support. If you think of farm workers, for example, most of who are undocumented, do they deserve better than to live in the shadows? They're putting food on our tables. They have tremendous bipartisan support. Do you believe in due process? Something so fundamental to the democracy of our country. The vast majority of people support maintaining due process.
What is the long-term plan for, as far as California is concerned, with regard to ensuring that due process, or trying to ensure that due process actually does take place?
The congressional delegation is insisting on being able to provide our oversight role, whether it's at facilities in California, through hearings here in Congress, and over time we'll get the information. I do have formal requests into the White House for this information, for briefings, because that lack of communication, that lack of coordination with local law enforcement especially, is only making the problem worse.
Senator Padilla, we thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lindsay.
President Trump is preparing for his military parade in Washington, D.C. on Saturday. Today, the president met with troops at Fort Bragg. As sources tell ABC News, the parade will include mounted rocket launchers and a precision-guided missile. The president also sent a warning to anyone planning to protest at the parade. Here's our Mary Bruce.
Tonight, as tanks roll towards Washington to prepare for President Trump's military parade, the president with this warning to anyone who might show up to protest.
If there's any protester who wants to come out, they will be met with very big force. By the way, for those people that want to protest, they're going to be met with very big force.
There are protests planned for the day of the parade around the country.
And I haven't even heard about a protest But, you know, this is people that hate our country.
The president has longed for this parade, a show of military might like he's seen from other countries. Sources tell ABC News mounted rocket launchers will be on display, as well as a precision-guided missile. This in addition to those tanks and an assortment of fighting vehicles. The event will also feature 6,700 soldiers and a 50-aircraft flyover. Trump getting a bit of a preview today in a visit to Fort Bragg.
Saturday is going to be a big day in Washington, D.C. You know, a lot of people say, we don't want to do that. I say, yeah, we do. We want to show off a little bit.
The parade, which is billed as a celebration of the Army's 250th anniversary, also falls on Trump's 79th birthday. Sources tell us it could cost up to $45 million.
Mary Bruce joins us now from the recently renamed Fort Bragg. And Mary, today, while the president was there, he also made an announcement about some other bases. What did he have to say?
He did, Lindsay. The president telling troops here that he is restoring the names of 7 military bases that were originally named for Confederate officers, including one named for Confederate General Robert E. Lee. Lindsay.
All right, Mary Bruce for us. Thanks so much, Mary. Overseas now, at least 10 people, 9 of them students, were killed in a school shooting in Austria's second largest city. The shooting is the deadliest attack in that country since World War II. Officials say the shooter is a 21-year-old former student who later took his own life. Austria's chancellor has called and declared 2 days of mourning. ABC's Tom Sufi-Burge reports from Austria.
Tonight, the horror inside a high school. Students capturing the moment deadly gunfire erupted during a rare mass shooting in Austria. Authorities in the city of Graz say a 21-year-old Austrian man walked into the school with a rifle and a handgun he legally owned and opened fire. At least 10 people killed, including 9 teenage students and 1 teacher. Nearly a dozen more students injured. First responders treating victims at the scene. Video posted to social media showing the immediate aftermath of the shooting. Students rushing through the hallways as heavily armed officers escorted them to safety. Tonight, this community shaken.
The first thing is shock, to be honest. I think you can't react other way. Like, I think the whole city, everyone in the school is in complete shock.
Understandably so. Tom Sufi-Burge joins us now. Tom, what more are you learning about a possible motive for the shooter?
Yeah, Lindsay, you can see the tributes behind me in the central square here in Graz. Now, officials say the shooter took his own life at the scene. He's a former student at the school who didn't graduate. Authorities say they found a letter during a search of his home. But so far, Lindsay, they have not revealed a motive.
Tom, let's talk about that deadly shooting near an aid distribution center in Gaza. The third time the IDF has opened fire near an aid site in the last 10 days. How's the IDF explaining this incident?
Well, once again, Lindsay, the IDF says it fired warning shots towards Gazans who were heading towards one of these aid distribution sites, which is run by this US-backed group. The shooting, the IDF says, happened hundreds of meters away from that site. Hamas is claiming more than 30 people were killed in the incident. The IDF is saying they are aware of reports of people being injured and disputing Hamas's figures. But I think, you know, all of the arguments aside, this once again raises questions about this US-backed aid distribution scheme. The World Food Programme, Lindsay, today saying 600 to 700 trucks have been allowed to get into Gaza of their aid in the last 3 weeks since Israel dropped its aid blockade. And they say that normally, earlier in the war, 600 or 700 trucks would be getting into Gaza with humanitarian aid on a daily basis. So there are serious questions still about this US-backed scheme which Israel is running. It says it is necessary to stop aid getting into the hands of Hamas. Lindsay?
Tom Sufi-Burge reporting from Austria for us tonight. Tom, thank you. HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has ignited an uproar after removing every member of the CDC's Vaccine Advisory Board. We first reported on this last night, and now the protesters at the CDC tell us the brain trust is gone. Our senior national correspondent Steve Osinsami reports from the CDC tonight.
Outside the CDC today, they're fed up.
The brain trust is gone. The people that we trust to give us the right information, the scientific explanation, are going to be gone. And RFK Jr. is going to be the one calling the shots.
They're upset with the nation's health secretary, who tonight is defending his decision after assuring lawmakers that he wouldn't mess with the committee of experts who advised the CDC on vaccines.
We're going to bring people onto the ACIP panel, not anti-vaxxers. We're bringing people on who are credentialed scientists and who are going to follow the science and make critical public health determinations for our children.
In what some say is a stunning reversal, RFK Jr. fired the 17 scientists, saying they'll be replaced. Dr. Noel Brewer got one of the pink slips.
Healthcare providers used to look to ACIP to establish best recommendations based on evidence and expert advice. And that expertise has left the building.
For years, Kennedy has questioned the science of vaccines.
There's no vaccine that is, safe and effective.
Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy, a doctor, was a deciding vote in approving Kennedy for the job and said this at the time after meetings with RFK Jr.
It confirmed he will maintain the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices recommendations without changes.
Do you have any regrets? Today he was quiet about that vote, but online said that he worried a new advisory board will be filled up with people who know nothing about vaccines except suspicion.
Our thanks to Steve Osunsami. We have more questions than answers regarding how the dismissal of this vaccine advisory committee will affect access to vaccines. For that, ABC News medical correspondent Dr. Darian Sutton, kind enough to join us here in studio. Thank you so much for coming on. Okay, so you have Secretary Kennedy, who's accusing the advisory committee of having a conflict of interest. At least one committee member and a former director of the CDC says that's simply not true. Could Kennedy have an ulterior motive here?
It's difficult to say if he has an ulterior motive. He states that he wants to make sure that he improves the level of trust between the community, the public, and public health advisories, but his actions state otherwise. The Academy, the Advisory Committee for Immunization Practices, has existed since 1964, arguably one of the most important public health bodies. And in this unprecedented move of dissolving this committee, it unfortunately damages the continuity that has been put in place. These members have been selected in a staggered way to continue that continuity. And that leads to more confusion, and that degrades trust, which is so important, as you've already seen. It's not even about what will happen. It's about what is already happening and how that could get worse. We are right now seeing a wide outbreak of measles. We are on track to seeing the highest numbers of measles cases that we've seen since 1992. And with that comes complications and risks, and that's the whole purpose of the advisory committee to prevent.
Now, Secretary Kennedy has said that he will replace the 17-member panel, but when you don't have that advisory committee currently, what could that mean as far as vaccines in the short and long term?
Yeah, that means more confusion. So in the short term, there's typically nothing that is significantly changing. And typically the advisory committee makes recommendations that then leads to the approval by the Health and Human Services Secretary. And then inevitably, vaccine companies will typically cover that vaccine and provide coverage and access. So we have to wait and see how these changes will take effect in the fall, especially with the upcoming flu season. You and I have talked about this a lot. There's a lot of benefit in these vaccines, and not only preventing these long-standing diseases that we're always trying to tamper down, including measles, pertussis, and otherwise, but also infections that are looming. We're talking about flu and COVID, the upcoming seasons.
If the vaccine schedule does change, if the government stops recommending certain vaccines, how could that impact which shots insurers cover, and what kind of money are we talking about?
Tremendously. A vaccine can cost up to hundreds of dollars. And you can imagine for a parent, especially for parents who have multiple children, just trying to understand how to pay for that can be incredibly difficult. When the recommendations are made by the advisory committee, again, that typically leads to the insurance companies covering that, which reduces costs on the end of patients. And that improves access, improves coverage, and helps us to prevent disease. When we don't have that benefit, when we don't have that financial opportunity to protect people from those costs, unfortunately, less parents are going to get their kids vaccinated, and we're going to see a spread of already growing problems. For example, measles, but also we have other infections that we need to keep back. For example, pertussis, which causes whooping cough. And Linsey, it's upsetting to me and concerning that we might even see other types of infections that have only remained in textbooks that we can suddenly see in streets.
A lot of confusion. We thank you for offering a bit of clarification for us all. Dr. Darian Sutton, thank you so much.
Of course.
Country music star Connor Smith is breaking his silence after police said he was involved in a deadly car accident over the weekend. Nashville police say Smith was behind the wheel of his pickup truck when he struck and killed a 77-year-old woman in a crosswalk. There were no signs he was impaired and no charges have been filed. An attorney for Smith says that Smith is cooperating with the investigation and that his heart goes out to the victim's family. Turning now to the high-profile Sean Diddy Combs trial. Combs' ex-girlfriend Jane faced day one of cross-examination, where she testified that she still loves Combs. The defense tried to paint her as a jealous type who allegedly benefited from her relationship with the hip-hop mogul. Joining us now with more courtroom insight, as always, ABC News legal contributor Shauna Lloyd, once again back in the court again today. So jurors got a chance to see a different side of Jane today. Got a little bit testy. What was that about?
Absolutely. So essentially, Teeny Garagos was questioning her about these text messages where she says she doesn't want to participate in these hotel nights. Well, they went back. It really started with her seeing Sean Combs with another woman and gifting her things, taking her on her vacations. And you start to see that she kind of is like, I deserve that. I should have that. I don't understand why you're doing this with other women while we're doing these intimate things. And at that point, when Teeny started asking her about the cost of the bag, she started firing back, asking her own questions. Well, you should know that. And well, don't you have one? And so jurors saw that sort of attitude and that feistiness. And that really speaks to that incident of violence that she said on the stand, that she actually started when she hit his head into a counter and then threw some candles at it. So the jury definitely got to see another side of her, and they were paying rapt attention.
The defense also tried to show that she was a willing participant in some of their sexual encounters.
Absolutely. We saw text messages where she initiates it. She is the person reaching out to the escort. She even bought Sean Combs a movie screen projector so they could watch their videos back. So all of these things speak to, and she said on the stand as well that she consented to them at the time. Now looking back, she feels as though she should have spoken up. But at the time, she did consent to participate in these activities.
A winning day, do you think, for the defense as far as edging more, perhaps? We're not really having that clear line between the racketeering.
Absolutely. I think the defense got in some really good hits. We have to remember that reasonable doubt isn't necessarily one big blow. It's a lot of small little cuts that eventually build up to where a jury says, I think there's reasonable doubt. I cannot go forth with this conviction.
And how is the defense really trying to dismiss the sex trafficking charge?
So the sex trafficking charge is what they're really working to dismantle when it comes to her, because what they're alleging is that it was force or coercion. That's where they're showing that she has income. She could have paid for the home herself. The fact that they only purchased the home really to have a place to be outside of the eyes of paparazzi, to have these hotel nights. She spoke about them wanting to have a place where they could have these private, intimate moments and not worry about being spotted out and about. Also, she talked about the drugs. They asked her, how old were you when he offered you the drugs? She was 34. She said, he offered it, but I felt like I was expected to take it. It wasn't something that was articulated. She said she just felt that way and that she did willingly take it. So all of those things speak to her willingness, and it takes away from that coercion that is required for the human trafficking.
All right, all very interesting development. Shauna Lloyd, our thanks to you as always. The breaking headline in New York City tonight, federal authorities say they've uncovered a horrific plot to target Jews here in New York City. Our chief investigative correspondent, Aaron Katursky, has the details.
Just days after the horrific firebombing targeting Jewish demonstrators in Boulder, Colorado, and the deadly shooting of 2 Israeli embassy employees in Washington, D.C., tonight authorities unsealing new charges in an alleged plot targeting Jews in New York City. Federal prosecutors say a 20-year-old Pakistani national wanted to carry out a coordinated attack with AR-15-style rifles on a Jewish center in Brooklyn in the name of ISIS. The FBI, quoting the suspect Mohammed Khan, is saying New York is perfect to target Jews. Even if we don't attack an event, we could rack up easily a lot of Jews. We are going to NYC to slaughter them. Authorities say Khan was talking to undercover law enforcement officers, allegedly saying he was trying to create a real offline cell. Khan was arrested last September in Canada, 12 miles from the border, where the FBI says he tried to hire someone to smuggle him into the United States.
Coming up, Apple unveils its new operating system, what the company says makes it special. And Americans are betting big bucks on everything from college basketball to overseas cricket. And for some, it has proven too hard to stop. In tonight's Prime Focus, a look at the rise in sports betting.
Gambling's the only addiction where you can convince yourself that continuing the very pattern that got you into that situation will cure it.
Welcome back, everyone. During March Madness alone, Americans gambled an estimated $3 billion. And there are, of course, live sports every day. The gamblers wager on NBA playoffs, football, baseball, and for some, addiction is a real and acute problem. In tonight's Prime Focus, our DeMarco Morgan looks at the rise in sports betting and the real lives caught in the middle of the rush to win it all.
Every year, March Madness draws millions of viewers and billions of dollars of wagers placed on the games. For many, the thrill of scoring a big payout is just as important as their favorite team winning it all. But underneath the bonus bets and multi-leg parlays, a financial pressure is growing on millions of people to keep gambling.
How big of a problem is this?
By sheer number of people impacted, I think that we're on a trajectory to see the worst epidemic of addiction that the world has ever seen.
Wow.
Sports betting is big business. The American Gaming Association estimates $3.1 billion will be wagered at sportsbooks this year during the NCAA tournament.
Gambling's the only addiction where you can convince yourself that continuing the very pattern that got you into that situation will cure it.
Professor Stephen Masters knows the sports gambling world well. He teaches classes on sports gambling at NYU.
I don't think that FanDuel and DraftKings wants, or any of those big operators want you to lose everything. They want you to win because then they'll keep coming back.
And worked as a consultant for all the major betting platforms. Online sports betting is relatively new. Since 2018, 37 states and Washington, D.C. have legalized online sports gambling.
The genesis of it was Adam Silver wrote an op-ed in November of 2014 in the New York Times, and he was the first active commissioner to write something about sports bet wasn't completely negative and saying that it'll never happen. Times have changed, and he thought it needed a fresh look and a new perspective.
And sports fans can't avoid the sports books, as the University of Bristol study finds that up to 20% of every game is spent watching gambling ads.
DraftKings. Now, I know it's the Super Bowl and all, but everyone gets a free bet.
DraftKings and other gambling platforms use major stars to help boost their profile.
The sales pitches were very aggressive. If they give someone an offer and they lose money on that first bet or the first couple bets, that was okay because the lifetime value of that fan, presumably, they would be a loyal customer, hopefully, and that they would make money.
All right, Lisa, how did we get here?
Oh man, I don't know. I'm like trying to go back. It's been a couple of years since in the making of getting here.
There was a point where he was depositing, what, roughly $60,000 or more.
That the subpoenas showed us after, yes, when I looked, yeah.
And you had no clue?
No, my jaw dropped.
For people like Lisa D'Alessandro, gambling ruined her life and her marriage.
You saw the money was no longer there. You said, I gotta go.
Yeah, I was scared.
D'Alessandro is suing DraftKings, not because she was a gambler, but because her husband gambled away their life's savings on the app.
And you lost $900,000.
Yes, and we're not talking about the recycled winnings.
According to the complaint, which doesn't name Lisa's husband, he was allegedly depositing anywhere from $30,000 to $140,000 a month to gamble on DraftKings.
Why go after DraftKings and not your ex-husband?
So it's not about going after my ex-husband. It's about what DraftKings did to me by allowing him to use funds that weren't his. I was in the hospital giving birth to my son John, Super Bowl weekend of 2023. My ex wanted access to gamble, and so he talked to his VIP host, boom, 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 while I'm giving birth to my son.
The lawsuit alleges that her husband was encouraged by so-called VIP hosts, DraftKings employees, who are assigned to big spenders to keep them gambling, and at one point offering him Apple products, free vacations, and DraftKings branded items.
So what makes DraftKings actions illegal?
Our complaint alleges that DraftKings violated the New Jersey Consumer Fraud Act, which, as it was amended in August 2022, prohibits abusive business practices.
But couldn't they argue, we didn't make him do it, we didn't make him spend all the money?
Oh, they can argue it, and they will argue that. My argument is not in this case, and in no case, is it that the gambler is 0% responsible, that he has no responsibility. But the argument by the casinos that they have no responsibility isn't correct either.
DraftKings responded to Lisa's lawsuit with a motion to dismiss and alleging that the plaintiffs were not the direct consumer of the app, a quote requirement under the New Jersey Consumer Fraud Act. In a statement to ABC News, DraftKings said in part that in this case, Lisa was not a DraftKings customer, and the company has no legal obligation or involvement in this personal family matter. They continued by saying that they are committed to providing the best possible experience for customers and take that responsibility seriously, while, quote, upholding the highest standards of compliance and responsible gaming in every jurisdiction where we operate.
How common is a story like this?
Unfortunately, it is extremely common. It has become almost my exclusive practice. Almost all of my cases at this point involve predatory gambling practices. I receive a phone call or an email from an addicted gambler or the family of an addicted gambler almost every day.
So what was a normal day for you when you were addicted?
Well, I'd wake up and I'd check my phone instantly. It was a shot of adrenaline because I'd placed bets the night before on Chinese basketball, Japanese baseball, Korean baseball, pretty much anything in Asia that was on. And I'd wake up and I'd either find out good or bad news. Either way, my next step was to go and start gambling basically immediately.
Rob Minnick used to be addicted to gambling. Now he's trying to help people who realize they might have a problem. He runs a website that directs people to resources and services that can help them stop gambling.
So in total, how much money did you lose?
So I'm asked that question all the time, and I hope that you forgive me for giving you a roundabout answer. The reason that I never answer directly is because I know there's a young man or woman watching this right now that's in the same boat that I was in 3-4 years ago. And if I give you a number, what they're gonna think if they've lost less than that number, I'm not that bad. He's the addict, I'm not. So I like to kind of say that I've gone into debt 6 times over 6 years to the point that I was working 80-hour weeks for months to pay it off.
As more states move to legalize online sports gambling, Rob believes there's even more reason for him to speak up about what he went through.
Do you think this industry should be regulated at a higher level?
Absolutely. But if you look at the way it's advertised, it's basically the most unregulated advertising that exists in the world. You look at the stock market, if you see a commercial for Robinhood, Schwab, there's a big disclaimer that says you could lose your money if you buy this product. You look at a gambling commercial, and it says, hey loser, if you messed up, give us a call. It's a very, very different proposition when you look at it like that.
Our thanks to DeMarco for that. Coming up, the invasive species of ants spreading across the country. Where do they come from? What states are affected? And what to do to protect your home? We'll tell you next. But first, it's summer and rackets are out as pickleball, padel, and other racket sports get more popular. New courts and even city country clubs are popping up. We take a look at the rising popularity by the numbers. Welcome back, everyone. As people head outside to enjoy the summer with friends and family, a new sports club is taking a swing at cashing in on the rising popularity of sports like pickleball. They're calling it Ballers. Here's a look by the numbers. The professional athletes and investors behind the new sports social club Ballers are betting $20 million that socializing over racket sports will continue to draw big crowds. Pickleball has actually been around for 60 years, invented by a former congressman and a friend as a family-friendly game. By 2024, 19.8 million Americans had embraced the paddle. That's according to the Sports and Fitness Industry Association. That's a whopping 638% increase since 2017, a boom fueled by younger picklers jumping onto the court. In fact, 2.3 million players are between the age of 25 to 34, making the group the sport's largest demographic. And now a new racket sport may be taking a shot at pickleball's success. It's called padel. And 30% of Gen Z respondents told a recent survey they've tried the tennis squash mashup. Padel originated in Mexico in the 60s. It's been gaining popularity in Spanish-speaking countries, now headed to a court near you. Still ahead, he fronts the award-winning reboot of Queer Eye. Stylist Jonathan Van Ness is here to discuss his latest project, a novel about the tribulations of a gender non-conforming 18-year-old. But next, the terrifying scene, a driver trapped inside a burning car. What happened next? The invasive species of stinging ants spreading across the country. Apple's new operating system hoping to expand AI's capabilities, and the 18-year-old running for mayor in Alabama. These stories and more in tonight's rundown.
An invasive species of stinging ants is spreading across the U.S. The Asian needle ant has been found in at least 20 states, mostly in the northeastern and southeastern U.S. The ants are shiny dark brown to black and are just a fifth of an inch in length. The ants can sting when bothered, which can lead to hives and itching, low blood pressure, difficulty breathing, and nausea. To limit their spread, experts recommend storing any chopped wood off the ground. Apple has unveiled expanded artificial intelligence capabilities and a new design interface across all of its products, marking the tech giant's latest round of updates as it aims to compete in the high-stakes AI race. A fresh operating system called iOS 26 will deliver new user features such as real-time language translation in iMessages and image identification. Apple also said it would make additional artificial intelligence capabilities available to developers, allowing them to create AI-fueled software for Apple products. Olympic gold medalist Simone Biles apologized for comments made to conservative activists and former college swimmer Riley Gaines. Biles argued that Gaines was merely a sore loser for losing a race to a trans athlete. The two were debating on X about the presence of transgender athletes in sporting competitions after Gaines recently criticized a transgender high school student who was allowed to compete in a Minnesota girls softball tournament. Biles ultimately said, "We all want a future for sport that is fair, inclusive, and respectful." A recent high school graduate is taking an early step into politics. While many of his peers are enjoying summer break, Brandon Moss is donning a suit and tie, ready to take on the responsibilities of public office. The 18-year-old officially announced his candidacy for mayor of Fairfield, Alabama, which has about 10,000 residents. Addressing concerns about his age, Moss highlighted his experience over the past 4 years, working with other politicians and serving as the executive assistant to the superintendent of Birmingham City Schools. A police officer and a pair of Good Samaritans helped save a driver from a burning car in New York State. Officer Nicholas Cantino of the Chester Police Department arrived on scene of a rollover accident to find the driver trapped in her car. Cantino gave his fire extinguisher to a nearby motorist, then broke the car's sunroof in order to extract the driver with the help of a paramedic and another motorist on scene. Officials said the driver suffered burns on a third of her body but is now in stable condition. Eagles owner Jeffrey Lurie is making a major contribution to autism research in Philadelphia. Lurie announced he's donating $50 million to establish the Lurie Autism Institute, a partnership between Penn Medicine and Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. The gift is the largest single donation to a U.S. academic medical center focused on autism research.
June is Pride Month, and Emmy Award-winning TV personality Jonathan Van Ness, best known for Queer Eye, and New York Times bestselling author Julie Murphy have teamed up to write a novel for young adults. Their book, Let Them Stare, tells the story of Sully, a gender nonconforming teen whose plans to escape their small town are derailed, leading to an unexpected summer of self-discovery, ghosts, and a little hidden queer history. Joining us now, Jonathan and Julie, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, so basically, Let Them Stare really celebrates non-binary and gender non-conforming people in general, set in a small town. Why did you decide to set it in the small town?
I mean, I definitely think that Let Them Stare centers a non-binary character in Sully, but I think that Sully faces a situation that many non-binary people face and young people face, non-binary or not, which is a community that doesn't necessarily understand them, doesn't necessarily celebrate them or meet them where they're at. So they have to do a little 18-year-old pivot, honey, and a little intergenerational haunted purse with a drag queen from the 1950s comes in.
Sprinkled in.
Yes.
For good measure.
And that's in Rufus. And so Rufus and Sully make up for a very dynamic duo, and they are learning all sorts of mysteries all over Hearst, Pennsylvania.
And Rufus is from the 1950s,
yes.
Really, drag queen.
Yes.
And he brings a lot of the queer history into it. Why was that important?
Yeah, the queer history. I think that Jonathan and I have talked a lot about queer people in small towns often don't understand that they are not the first people in this small town or in this setting to be queer or to be different in some sort of way. The mantra from the book from the very beginning was grow where you're planted. And that means so much to us, especially in times like these when queer people are feeling like they're being victimized or like
silenced, erased.
Yeah, and so it's really important to know that like people have come before you and they have survived, and so can you.
Where did you guys get the idea from, and in particular to target the YA audience, young adult?
Well, the original idea came from, I had impulse bought a really chic bag, and I was sitting there looking at this oversized bag, and I was like, what if you were haunted? Like, what if it was like giving genie in a bottle, but like different, and like a queen in a purse instead of a genie in a bottle? And so that was kind of the idea. And I think for me, why YA was such an exciting opportunity is like, I really didn't understand any existence of queer history until I was like well into my 30s. And as a younger person, that would have been so helpful for me to know that even in my hometown, like where I am from, Quincy, Illinois, there's a rich queer history there.
And Julie, you touched on this before with people feeling that they're silenced. But again, because you did start this 3 years ago, how timely do you think this is for these characters to be out now?
Painfully timely. Yeah, I mean, things have changed in the last 3 years. I think that all of our perspectives have changed quite a bit in the last few years. But I'm really excited for young people to have this book in this moment, because it's the kind of book that I needed when I was a young person, and I know it's the kind of book that Jonathan needed as well.
Yes, I think that really is so much of the inspiration in Let Them Stare, is that so much of the stories that we're told are like, you have to escape your small town. You got to get to that big city. And for so many people, that's just not possible. Yeah. And not only is it not possible, but why can't being where you are from be cool and be sought after and be something to be celebrated? And I see people doing it all the time, but we just don't see these stories like being told. And so I was like, honey, let's tell this story.
Yeah, we talked a lot about if you can't see it, you can't be it. That was another secondary mantra for the book.
You know, one common theme that I hear from a lot of authors that come on the show is, my life would have been changed if a book like this existed when I was a kid growing up. And I'm curious how your life might have been different.
I mean, I think for one thing, for me growing up, so much of the queer content that we had was either like not appropriate for YA, meaning that it was like, like on the internet, like not cute, or it was like, very limited. And so just seeing that there's like interesting things to happen in your hometown, there's queer history in your hometown, you don't have to leave to find it, that could have changed the trajectory of my whole young adult life.
Yeah. Thank you both so much for coming on. Let Them Stare by Jonathan Van Ness. You know him from Queer Eye. New York Times bestselling author Julie Murphy is available now wherever books are sold. And that is our show for this hour. I'm Linsey Davis. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thank you so much for streaming with us.